That's great, but I mean, you talked about how recently now you're deciding to move from figure to bikini. What's been behind that decision?
Um, so I actually, uh, nobody knows it yet. But I'm ready to talk about it. So I actually fired my previous coach. Um, Definitely a learning experience to say the least. So I hired somebody new to kind of help me out of this last prep that I went through. And he actually suggested it. He said, "Have you ever thought about doing bikini?" And I was like, "No, like, okay." And he just, I mean, looking into it a little bit more, it makes sense uh, from where I'm currently sitting as far as muscle and because if I want to be if I'm trying to make it to that pro level as far as a figure girl, I mean, I did listen to your last podcast. I mean, it's you I'd have to run gear. I mean, it's just something that in order to be competitive, because I mean, I do have good genetics, but they're not that good. Um, and it's not just something simple as like VAR. I mean, I'd probably have to run VAR and Winstraw, and I don't know. And um, I'm really happy with the way that I look. I definitely think that there's things that I can improve on, and there's perfection is always the goal, and I'm definitely not perfect. I have my strengths, and I just think that right now, the tools that I have as far as my body composition, the way that my shoulders sit, my glutes, my legs, and my overall shape, like that hourglass shape. I think I'd be a really, really strong competitor in the bikini division right now. And that's not to say that in 10 years I'm not a figure girl, or even 2 years, or even in a year. But so figure, I haven't tried it. I am probably a lot more competitive in that division right now. So I might as well try it because I'm definitely not ready to jump back into a growth phase after this last prep that I went through to work. I mean, I dropped from 158 pounds to I was 132 yesterday morning. And I started my prep May 13th. So it's been about 15 weeks. So,
Yeah, that's quite a change. And she's referencing the podcast I did with Stephanie with her expose into drug use. And I just got to give a shout out to Stephanie for being so transparent in that. I mean, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on that. But yeah, that was eye opening for me. Like I knew that it was being used a lot in the sport, but to that extent, I was just absolutely
oh yeah.
flabbergasted. But yeah, it's definitely a decision. Yeah, for pro athletes, I mean, 95% of them, yeah, that's really what you have to do if you want to win a pro card. But it's definitely, but for bikini, I think, yeah, you can do it naturally and do very well in the sport, which is what I think part of it, what was why it was made too. But going into, I mean, just that whole mindset of, this sport that, you might have to, do stuff. Was that something that you were aware of ahead of time when you were getting started in this? Or was it something that you discovered where you're like, oh, if I really want to do super well, I might have to do something?
I always knew it would be there in the back of my mind. It was actually, I think I was 20, so it was about 4 years ago. Or actually, it was 2 years ago. So I was 22. Um, I was getting ready to think about competing. I knew I wanted to compete, and honestly, I was like kind of looking for a shortcut to get there. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll, you know, run some steroids. And I was like, in reality, I literally didn't even know what any of them were. Like, I had no idea. I couldn't even tell you one. I was just like, oh, like a steroid is a steroid. I didn't know that there was a difference between Anavar and Winstrol or any of that. And so, honestly, those are probably the only two that I even know right now that I'm familiar with. So that just shows you my knowledge on it. Um, but basically, I had talked to somebody that I was working with about it. I was like, I might start running something. They're like, what would you run? Like bar? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And so the more that I kind of sat on it and thought about it, I was like, you know what? I know that I've got good genetics behind me. I do two things really well. I put on body fat and muscle extremely well. Um, and it's just a matter of keeping it when I cut. Um, and I just figured, I'm 22. I'm going to work my ass off for the next 2 years. And if I don't get where I need to be, then I'll consider it. But I figure I'm young enough in this sport that I have the opportunity to try and do it naturally. Um, and so that's kind of where I'm at. And so that's what I kind of talked about. It's like I'm just not ready to dip my toe into those waters, especially given that I just don't know what it's going to do to my hormone levels.
That I mean, yeah, we had a hormone specialist on too, and that was a whole another thing that we got into it as well, and that was just eye opening for me. Like I always believed that I didn't even know that guys had hormones, to be completely honest, before we even had that podcast. Where I like if someone told me like go get your hormones checked, I'd be like, why? I'm not pregnant or anything like that. But yeah, that shows how little I know. And then also with steroids too. Before this podcast, I thought that there was just one steroid, and it was like everything in the movies where you just injected one thing, and then all of a sudden, you got. So yeah, it really shows my knowledge as well. But yeah, it's crazy, how how different it actually really is